In this video, I will explain Chapter 2, The Address by Marga Minco from the textbook Snapshot. There will be a question in between the explanation. You will write it down in your notebook and will write the answer only after watching the entire explanation. That means you have to listen carefully and answer it based on your understanding of the explanation. Now, before we start with the explanation, let's begin with an introduction of the chapter. The story is about the human predicament that follows the pre-war and post-war period. Mrs. S., who was a Jew, was a rich lady, whereas Mrs. Dorling was a non-Jew. The narrator, who is the daughter of Mrs. S., had lost her house and her mother during the war, and now she had decided to come back to take her possessions from Mrs. Dorling, who was an acquaintance whose address was given by her mother years ago. When she reached the house, the woman treated her with a cold reception and did not let her into the house. She decided to go back anyway, and then she met her daughter, who let her in and told her to wait inside. When she saw all the possessions in front of her, she couldn't connect with them and decided to leave the house. Now, I will briefly explain the story, so let's begin. At the beginning of the story, it is narrated how the narrator was given a cold reception when she went to her native place after the war in search of her mother's belongings. After ringing the bell of house number 46 in Marconi Street, a woman opened the door. On being introduced, the woman kept staring at her in silence. There was no sign of recognition on her face. The woman was wearing her mother's green knitted cardigan. The narrator could understand that she had made no mistake, so she asked the woman whether she knew her mother. The woman could not deny this. The narrator wanted to talk to her for some time, but the woman cautiously closed the door. The narrator stopped there for some time and then left the place. In the subsequent sections, the memories of the narrator's bygone days come to light. Her mother had provided the address years ago during the war. She went to the house for a few days. She could find that various things were missing. At that time, her mother told her about Mrs. Dorling. She happened to be an old acquaintance of the narrator's mother. Lately, she had renewed contact with her and had been coming there regularly. Every time she left their house, she took something home with her. She told that she wanted to save all their nice possessions. The next day, the narrator saw Mrs. Dorling going out of their house with a heavy suitcase. She had a fleeting glimpse of Mrs. Dorling's face. She asked her mother whether the woman lived far away. At that time, the narrator's mother told about the address, number 46 Marconi Street. After many days after the war, the narrator was curious to take record of the possessions that must still be at number 46 Marconi Street. With this intention, she went to the given address. The concluding part of the story describes the second visit of the narrator. As the narrator's first visit yielded no result, so she planned to go once again. Interestingly, a girl of 15 years old, opened the door to her. Her mother was not at home. The narrator expressed her wish to wait for her, so the girl accompanied her to the passage. The narrator saw an old-fashioned iron candle holder hanging next to a mirror. The girl made her sit in the living room and went inside. The narrator was horrified to find herself in a room she knew and did not know. She found herself in the midst of familiar things which she longed to see again, but which troubled her in the strange atmosphere. She had no courage to look around her, but she no longer had the desire to possess them. So she got up, walked to the door, and left the room. She resolved to forget the address and moved on. So the story ends on that note. Now here's your question. Describe the narrator's second visit to Mrs. Dorling's place in 100 to 150 words. Remember, students, you have to write your answer in your own words, based on what you have read from the textbook as well as from the explanation of the chapter. With that, we have come to the end of the session. That is all for today's video.